How do you help a grumpy or sullen teenager in that moment without being an adversary to them? Doug?
First, it's not permitted to be that way around the house, right? You basically, if someone is admonished, come on, cheer up, time to rejoice in the Lord. If they do, great. If they don't receive it, then you say, why don't you head back to your bedroom and I'll be back there in a few minutes so we can talk. But you're not going to be that way in the kitchen or the dining room table. You can't spread it around. You're contagious, and we have to isolate it and then address it. Don't ignore it.
The other thing too is if you have a good rapport with your kids, there should always be a kind of I think like a kind of playful banter in the house. I mean, if your house should be a fun place to be, and as you are with your friends, where there's a playful banter, there's inside jokes, there's nicknames, they're not biting sarcasm, but sort of good-hearted sarcasm, that kind of thing. There should be.
Hey, everybody! Susie's out of fellowship again.
Well, yeah, but the point is if you have that kind of banter and you have that kind of playfulness and that kind of friendship with your kids, if there is something a little out of kilter, that may or may not be the right thing to say, but things like that you can have a kind of a poke, a friendly poke, a friendly sort of tickle, whatever, that sort of what are you doing? Where we love God. We're Christians. We're a happy family. And if they're being a little sullen or grumpy, sometimes I find that's just the thing. Or you can, again, you don't want it to be biting and you don't want it to be crushing, but just the right, well-aimed sort of jab that's friendly. And then a smile breaks out over his face. All right, you're right, Dad, and it's over, and it pops the bubble.
This also is why it's so important to discipline for attitudes when kids are small, because you don't want to be doing this with your 15-year-old when it's a bad day and you're trying to break a 12-year bad habit. That's a steep hill to climb. So you want to insist on cheerfulness from your littles. Moping and whining and complaining and tattling, all of those are correctable offenses, disciplinable offenses, and that's one of the reasons you have to be on it when your kids are little.
And I think we have this really bad habit of thinking that emotions happen to us, rather than Paul says, rejoice, and again I say it, rejoice in the Lord. That you're commanded to rejoice. You're commanded to have right, as Edwards would put it, right affections. And so you want to be training your kids from early on to have that their emotions aren't just happening to them. It's not just something that's occasioned upon them. They're called to take their emotions captive and lead them into maturity, so that when they get to be the grumpy teen, you can say, all right, time to cheer up.
I want to underline something that Doug said too, circling back to what I just said. You want to make sure that you've developed a really good, healthy, common cultural vocabulary in your home. So don't just take me saying, maybe tell a joke and maybe that'll work, or maybe give them a little friendly jab, maybe that'll pop them out. That only works if they know the language. You can't just spring that on them when they're 14 or 15. That goes back to his point about disciplining them, make sure there's good attitude, but also making sure you just can't randomly drop a joke on them when they're having a bad day. And the pastor said that would work. Well, no, I'm talking about a shared vocabulary where, they always laugh at that joke. They know what that means. They know it means you love them. Then you can do it. Then it's safe to do that. Ben,
Yep.
How should we as parents love or minister to the weakest, sulky, bitter, etc., in our spheres while actively cultivating wise friendships for our children?
Well, I think you have to remember that as a parent, you are also a guardian of your home. And like I said in my talk, we do pick our friends, and we help our children pick friends, choose the friends that they spend time with. And so it's not unkind to say you're not allowed to play with Johnny. You're not allowed to play with the kid that's moping around the playground. Now, this in our community, maybe it's a child at Logos or in the church that you notice is always the sulky one, always the manipulative one that's copping an attitude and trying to get his friends to take pity on him or whatnot. A lot of parents need to have the courage to have frank, loving conversations with other parents. Hey, you invited our son over, but we've just the times this has happened, we've seen that your son is mopey, he's sulky, and of course you need to be putting, just wham spring that upon them. But you need to be able to have those hard conversations with other Christian parents, or in our neighborhood, we have the neighborhood kids that come around that aren't always the best influence. You just need to be play the man and talk to the dad or talk to the family and say, hey, that's not allowed in our yard, and you need to give your children permission to tell the kids to get lost if they're having those attitudes, and that's not being unloving. That's you being a shepherd. That's you fighting wolves, so that your children aren't surrounded by those sort of friends.
Anything to add to that?
No, we did. Oftentimes if you have an intact family, and mom's home, and everybody's cheerful, that's a magnet for all the kids in the surrounding area, and they will want to be there. And you have to have moral order, and so consequently, I remember one time Nate sending a neighbor kid home because he was cussing, and you can't use that language in our yard, and you have to go. That there has to be standing permission and clear boundaries that way.
I mentioned too, we've just in terms of other ways, I think Ben's drawing those lines is ministering to these children. Don't make those things two different things. When you draw the lines and good fences make good neighbors kind of principle with regard to friendships, it is ministering in the sense that what you're doing is you're telling them that there's a way of doing business, a way of living life that's a different way. And you're welcome here under God's standards and under God's blessing. You're welcome. Come on over. We'd love to. But we're not going to go down that path with you. We're going to do, and that really is ministry. And then the other thing is when we didn't set out to do foster care, but God sort of hauled us in, and we ended up doing foster care for a number of years. And that really is more of a sort of ministry of sorts. But my wife and I were really, really careful about the kids we would let into our home. And I think my memory, but I think we were licensed for maybe 6 or 7 years. And during those 6 or 7 years, I think Jenny counted it up one time and thought we had been called for like 130 kids or something like that. And we said no to almost all of them. I think we had a total of about 20 kids through our house over the course of those years. Most of them for like one weekend. Most of them it was we need a place for a weekend and then they're going somewhere else, and we would agree to a real short period. But we had real clear lines we would draw. We wouldn't have a kid in our house who had been sexually abused. We just had a line. We just said no. And that's not because nobody needs to care for them, but it was because we had kids and we didn't want that in our home. We always had kids that were younger than our kids because that established a hierarchy. And we talked through it all with our kids regularly. These are kids that need to be loved. They need to be cared for. They don't know what a family is, and they are confused about everything. And we talked about it, and they knew it, and they would see the fits and then so on. But we almost always did babies and toddlers because that was, all the kids were bigger than them. And so it was really clear, established hierarchy. We knew which way the gravity was going to pull. And so, there's another example of ministering to them, but it was highly, highly guarded. And we made sure that our kids were in a position to lead, not follow. What advice should I give my son who shows interest in a Christian young lady, which is mutual, yet they are too young? He knows this, but the interest remains. How do I walk him through this? About 17 years old, in high school.
So
you go first.
So the illustration I use is if he knows he's too young and he knows it's not going anywhere, what you need, and it can't go anywhere, you have to guard at least two doors. One is you can't be interested and not be prepared to go and know that, and yet somehow get dibbies, right? I've noticed a lot of young men want to talk to the dad or get a place in line or be the first one to mention an interest in the young lady, and just forget it. If you're not in a position to pursue it,
can you pay the bills?
Can you pay the bills? And that's the other illustration. Is I'd say, well, why don't you, instead of showing it, why don't you drive up to Spokane this weekend and buy a Lexus? Well, I can't afford a Lexus. I don't have a paper route. And you say, yeah, but you'd look cute together. Well, Lexus is very, very expensive. You can't afford that. And one of the things you have to do is teach your son that, and this is another one of my stock phrases, you want to teach your son to become the kind of person he would want to marry would want to marry. All right? That's what you want to do. Become the kind of person that the kind of person you would want to marry, and then work hard. Get a second job. You say, well, it's so far away. Well, work harder. Do better in your schoolwork. This is worth it. But you can't say, oh, it's such a long time away, I'm not ready, and then sit on the couch. So basically divert, channel the energy that you have in this young lady into something productive that will make you attractive to that young lady in 3 years.
So she wouldn't ever think he'd always be the prime candidate based
Right.
on his hustle and his character and that sort of.
Right.
And then just really practically, I would just say make sure that it's really, really clear to him that since he can't buy a Lexus, he shouldn't be shopping for a Lexus.
Test driving
he
it.
shouldn't be test driving the Lexus. Basically, as far as she knows, he should just be a good friend in the community. He's not showing his cards. He's not sending her notes. He's not singling her out in any way. And he's, okay, fine. You think she's maybe a good idea? Okay, you're not ready. Save up, and don't be giving yourself to obsessing over her or thinking about her. There's the dibbies in actuality, but then there's dibbies in your head, dibbies in your heart kind of thing, and playing games and so on, which is not helpful or healthy at all. Any tips on how to encourage daughters to embrace modesty of dress?
That goes back to what I was saying last night on security. Women, young girls who are flaunting it are generally doing it out of a position of insecurity, not a spirit of wantonness. Okay, now there are exceptions, and there are, the world's a complicated place. But if you just went out in the world and talking to non-Christians, or the natural man, if you were talking to 100 men, if you interviewed 100 men who were promiscuous, you would be talking to 100 men who have a self-control problem with regard to a biological appetite. If you talk to 100 women who were promiscuous, you would be talking to women who have emotional insecurity issues, dad issues, ex-boyfriend issues. It's a complicated dance, and there are sexual issues involved in it as well. But what's front and center? Men and women are attracted to each other in different ways, and all the elements are present in both, but they're not structured in the same order. The lineup is not the same. So if you want a daughter who is not flaunting it, not trying to get attention from guys generally, you need to be loving on her, saturation love, a lot of attention, a lot of time with her, and that includes a firm line. No, honey, not that. You don't understand what the boys are thinking when you do that, and if you do understand, then that's even worse. So,
I think that First Peter talks about that. Let our conversation be holy, and you have to remember that what you wear says something. Your attire speaks for you. When you see a police officer, you see the uniform, you know what he's about. You know what his occupation is. When you see a doctor in a lab coat, I know what he's doing.
You see a UPS driver, it means books.
That's right. That's right. And so you have to recognize you're teaching your daughters early on that their communication, their words, what they're saying with their life and their words matters, and so that when they get in their teen years, they are wanting to say holy things. They're wanting to say honorable things with their dress and with their manner of life.
Two other things. One is just goes back to preparing kids when they're little. Talking about modesty when a girl is 3 is important, and talking about it when she's 6 and when she's 9. I think we like to laugh about a story when one of my daughters was probably like 4 or something like that. And we did a family camp one year at Lake Coeur d'Alene, and we turn around and see my little 4-year-old daughter looking at another girl from church, and she says, "We do not wear bikinis." That's how she said bikini. Anyways, and it was another 4-year-old girl in a 2-piece, and she just, "We do not wear bikinis." And we told her we were proud of her. Good job, way to go, honey. But she knew that from 4. That's immodest. And so that was the first thing, just practicing, preparing, so that it's not a new thing, it's not a strange thing. And then also remember that there's a temptation sometimes with modesty things or sexual things to call all of it gross sometimes, and so you're like, that's gross. Well, there is something that's gross about real perversion, but don't forget the fact that part of what's being perverted is something that really is very beautiful and really is glorious. And don't confuse the two categories. Make sure that they know that you believe that they're beautiful, that God made a woman to be beautiful. Her body is beautiful. That's from God. It's a glorious thing. And that's why you don't treat it like it's something that can just be shown off to everybody. It's for your husband. And so affirm you are beautiful. And your body is given to you by God for beauty, and it's for your husband. So make sure those categories are clear in their mind, so it's not just like, that's gross, and they're like, but I sure seems kind of beautiful to me. And now perversion really is gross, but there is something really beautiful there, and that should be really clear in their minds as well. All right, thank you very much for coming out. We are done. Have a great rest of your Saturday. And God bless.